Since 1986, with the first game releasing on the Nintendo Entertainment System, Zelda has been a critically acclaimed franchise. With 29 different video games released, including original titles, ports, remakes, and collections, this franchise has left its mark on the gaming world in amazing ways. In 2016, Nintendo rocked the world with the release of Breath of the Wild, an amazing game that spearheaded the initial sales of the Switch console. In 2023, can they do it again? With the release of their newest title, Tears of the Kingdom. My name is Llamas, and this is the spoiler-free review of The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. In this review, I will be going over a spoiler-free review of the game, not going into great detail, but trying to still get my point across to you, the viewer. I will make sure this review also has zero spoilers. If you would like to know more about the reasons why I gave it the score I did, or don't care about spoilers, go check out my spoiler review video, link in the description below. Let's get into the review then. Before the release of this game, many people were afraid that this was just going to be a $70 cash grab DLC Zelda game that would make Nintendo more money. I can tell you that is far from the truth. So if that was your main concern about this game, rejoice now because it is its own game. In the previous game, Link had abilities that he acquired at the beginning of the game, instead of getting them throughout like in many other Zeldas. This game is no different, but the abilities are different. Without going into detail about what they are, what they do, they are the best abilities I've ever seen. They are immensely creative, and Nintendo did a perfect job creating a world around you that could use these abilities. They would have not worked the best in the first game, but since they changed most of it, they worked beautifully. Speaking of the world of Zelda has never been this large before. Breath of the Wild blew everyone away with the sheer size of the map that you had at your disposal. This game blows it out of the water with nearly 2.5 times as much map to cover than its predecessor. Every inch of the map is covered with something to do. Whether it be enemies, collectibles, or instances, this game has something for you to do. The ability to climb, create, and glide allows you to go wherever you want with little restrictions. This has to be one of the best designed video game maps I have ever had the pleasure of exploring, and I'm sure I still won't be able to find anything without looking up help. Shrines and dungeons are back, and they are better than ever. The shrines in the game have more interesting puzzles than before. That left me wondering, how did the developers intend me to complete these? I could figure them out several ways to cheese the shrine, but figuring them out the intended way was the most fun since there were just too many creative ways to complete some of them. These dungeons remind me of the dungeons of old Zelda games, almost what I feel Breath of the Wild's dungeons should have been. Getting to them was more interesting, the mechanics in them were more fun, and the boss fights were diverse. They even have some of my favorite boss fights in the entire franchise. With more shrines and more dungeons to complete than Breath of the Wild, you will have a fun time exploring and finding them all. The story of the game was much better than I expected it to be. The story of Zelda games haven't always been the best in the video game genre out there. There are many better story-driven games than this one, but it doesn't mean Tears of the Kingdom doesn't do a great job. The voice acting was better, the cutscenes were all great, the beginning and ending were much more enjoyable, and the final fight fit much better into the story of the game. It still suffers from similar things like Breath of the Wild did, like the story being out of order depending on how you find it in the open world, but that didn't bother me too much. If this is something that would bother you, I would implore you to look up the order of them to watch them in the cutscenes in order, or skip them and watch them later in order because it does lay it out for you. The main story was a great length and had a much better flow and rate than Breath of the Wild. The side quests in the game varied immensely, with some being fun little quests to others being quite long and in-depth, rivaling that of some of the main story quests. The graphics and gameplay of this game has been a hot topic since Breath of the Wild released over 6 years ago. Cel-shaded graphics are not for everyone, and I understand that. I personally think they knocked it out of the park and released another timeless art style with this game. Just like Wind Waker released on the Nintendo GameCube and other cel-shaded games, this one will stand the test of times in terms of its art style. Now, how the game runs is another story. For 90% of your game time, the game will run at a stable 30 FPS, even while docked at 1080p. But for 9% of your time, the game will dip into the low 10s to 20s, and for that 1% of the time, it will dip really far down, making it unplayable for those few short moments. Even the 9%, it usually only happens occasionally and fixes itself rather fast. Unfortunately, until Nintendo releases a more powerful system that can run this game at a crisp 60 FPS, this is all we're going to get through the Switch. The game is also essentially glitch and bug free, to the point that when you find one, it almost feels like an intended feature. I never had to reset my game never crashed, and I never had any weird anomalies happen in the game that really caught my eye. I had to go out of my way to look up some to see them in action, and Nintendo patched up most of them within the first month. Now, if you watch some YouTubers or Twitch streamers, they will show you that the game actually has a lot of bugs. But this won't affect the normal user. It won't be like other games like Cyberpunk, where I can't go 10 minutes without playing it without seeing something bug or glitch out. The fighting mechanics in this game are almost the exact same as Breath of the Wild, besides a few things that are changed here and there. Fighting monsters and everything around you feels great, besides there not being a terrible amount of different mobs to actually fight. It suffers in that way, just like Breath of the Wild did. But they did improve on it a bit by adding more mobs to stand in your way throughout the game, making up for the few mobs they did take out of the game. The dungeon bosses were interesting to say the least. Some of them were a little underwhelming, while the other ones were really fun. Then it just happened to be one of the best Ganon fights in all of Zelda. So I think it makes up a bit for the other bosses. There are a few games out there that truly grab your attention and time as well as this game does. Sitting for hours and hours grinding away on the thing this game has to offer feels like no other. Any game that I can play for 8 hours straight and it only feels like 2 is a great game to me. The sheer amount of things that you can do in this game and the amount of time that you can spend to your heart's content is not enough unless it is also fun to play while doing it. This game delivers on that. You will have fun. From creating anything you can think of with the tools at your disposal to navigating a vast world to fighting strong enemies. The game nearly has it all. The game could be better, of course, than it is. There are a few downgrades from Breath of the Wild in this game, including your powers that you receive, but there are way more upgrades. This game has some of my favorite fights out of the entire Zelda genre, as well as a few of my favorite mechanics as well. If you have a Switch, I would recommend buying this game. You will get your $70 out of it, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. My final score for this game is a 91 out of 100. Remember, if you'd like to know more in detail about why I gave it this score and don't mind spoilers, go check out my spoiler review in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and to subscribe, and I will see you all on the next one.